Hey everybody, it's Matt, and I know it's been a while, but I've just been tied up with other things. But I wanted to weigh in with another John Lennon album review. So I'm doing those in order of release, and we're up to this one now. This would be John's first, I guess, proper album or album of actual music, having released his three experimental albums and then the live album Live Peace in Toronto before this, which was of course all songs we'd already heard just in a live setting. But this is his first album of new music, first conventional album, I guess, in a nutshell. John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. This came out December 11th of 1970. Got to number 6 in America and number 8 in England. There's the front cover, back cover, and I like the cover. It's kind of a stark, simple picture, uh, but kind of reflects the music in the album, which even though pared down, stripped down, and pretty straightforward and simple, is very powerful, affecting music. Certainly, though, it's not the big production of Abbey Road, Sergeant Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour, things like that. This is John in a different mode, and it's kind of funny that this cover, in some ways, reminds me of the Wings Wildlife cover and even the George Harrison 1979 album cover a little bit. But so there's John and Yoko sitting against a tree. And there's a little wee John as a grammar school kid way back when, and so there's that. Here is the inner sleeve lyrics, John doodles, and more lyrics, and then people on the album, which you really don't have many. You've got John on guitar and piano and vocals, Ringo on drums, and Klaus Borman on bass, and all of them turn in musically some great performances here, some of their best. And so yeah, the like I said, the album came out in 1970. I didn't run out and buy it when it came out because I was 7 years old. I did get around to getting this album 1977, somewhere in the October to December area. So, in a funny way, even though it's not a upbeat, cheerful, holiday themed album at all, it always sort of seemed like a Christmas album to me, which I didn't know at the time that it had been released in December originally. I just knew that it had come out in 1970. But uh, when I bought it, and I guess I was about 13 or so at the time, I wasn't familiar with any of the songs on it because they didn't play them on the radio. I only knew Mother because that's on the Shaved Fish album, which I got before this album. But um, just because I was playing it a lot that Christmas, it always sort of reminded me of Christmas. And it's an album that, in addition to other more mainstream or regular Christmas albums, I like Christmas music that I play every December. This always gets a spin or two. So uh, this is when this also comes up. Anytime anyone brings up the question of what's the best Beatles solo album, almost without fail, this and All Things Must Pass are mentioned. Every once in a while, Ram will get thrown in there, and I pretty much tend to agree with that. I think this and All Things are better records than Ram, even though Ram is my favorite Paul album and it's one of my favorite albums. Certainly, they're, I don't know, more artistic or weightier or something, and just good music. But um, very stark, raw, powerful, in some ways profound album. Not the happiest of records, not one that I play very often. When I do, I enjoy it just because the musical performances, even though they're pretty stripped down, are very enjoyable and uh, powerful in their own way. It's definitely, though, it's not a record if you're at a get together and someone says, "Hey, put some music on." I don't. Nobody's going to reach for this album. This is more of a solitary experience type album, I think. John got some criticism I've heard criticism on this album that, what do you got to worry about? You're one of the most famous people in the world, multimillionaire. You can have everything you want. Other people have to go work real jobs, and you were, 20 years old and a millionaire, and which is fair criticism to a point, I think. But I mean, I think there's also even people that have all that can have real pain, and it's kind of to John's credit, I think, that he went out on a limb of sorts to put himself out there and put an album like this out there, taking a chance, being eh, one of the most famous people in the world, especially at this time, right after the Beatles had broken up, when he easily could have just put out, because he's one of the greatest songwriters that ever lived, he could have easily just written some upbeat, radio-friendly pop songs, and probably would have sold more records and had more success had he done that with his first solo album. But he took a chance, and so I think that's to his credit. And so, anyway, let's get on into the songs. First song on side one is called Mother, which is about his abandonment by his father and losing his mother at a young age when he was only 17, and she was hit by a car and killed, and had been in his life to some degree, but not in his life a lot of times during his formative years. And it hits pretty hard. I mean, you start off the album with the tolling of funeral bells, and you know right off that this isn't gonna be She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah type album. So it's a very taut, claustrophobic rocker of a song. It was released as a single, which is kind of odd because it's hardly radio friendly fare, even though it is a great song. But I used to have the 45 with the picture sleeve, and I stupidly sold it years ago. I wish I wouldn't have, because that's one of the harder Beatle or solo Beatle picture sleeves to find, and worth a pretty penny then and worth a pretty penny now, even more. So, but it's just a hard song to listen to, even if you're fortunate enough that both of your parents were there for you in your life, which I fortunately was. But it's just sort of a tough song, but it's a very good song. It's got great vocals, and musically it's just very powerful. It's musically it's a great single. It's just subject matter is it only got to number 48 in America, and it's not much of a surprise because great a song as it is, it's not the sort of thing most people want to hear every day. So, but all that said, it's a great opener, and I'm going to give Mother a 10. Second song on side one is called Hold On, which is sort of a soothing, tender song. One of the not a whole lot of outright bright spots on this album, but this is a guarded bright spot, I'll say. It's just sort of a thing when things are tough. Soldier through and hold on, and things change, and maybe things will get better. Type message, and sort of brittle music backing it up that fits the theme and the lyrics of the song perfectly. Hold On, I'm going to give a 10 too. A 10 also. Third song, I Found Out. This is just great guitar and bass on this. Just about looking for answers and being disillusioned and believing in people and being let down type theme. And again, pretty raw and powerful. I'm going to give I Found Out a 9.5. There's John gets into quite a few things, including religion, and we'll return to that theme on a song also on this album coming up here in a bit. Fourth song, Working Class Hero. It's John and his guitar. Another, overusing the word powerful here, but just another very angry, powerful song. Great lyrics, some of John's best lyrics. And even though it's you don't think of it as, or most people probably don't think of it as such, because it's just John singing with an acoustic guitar, I think it's in my mind it's proto punk, and it's very direct line in my thinking, from Help, the song, to this album, to this, hold them right there, to these things. So it's another song, and it's was probably, when I got the album, was my favorite on the album. I think there's some in the years since that I've come to like just as much, but Working Class Hero for me gets a 10. And great lyrics, like I said, that well, I was gonna pull something out of there, but anyway, just great lyrics throughout. Great song. It gets a 10. Isolation is just a song about being alone, even if someone that has this much money and this much fame, in John's case, or it's a universal song. You can, a lot of people, you can be in a crowd and still be alone, type of thought to it, and relevant back then in 1970, maybe even more relevant nowadays in the age of social media and modern life, when a lot of people are just sort of off in their own little world, in their own little corner, doing whatever they do instead of talking to each other and communicating as much as we used to. So, Isolation, great vocals again, great vocals throughout this. That gets a 10. We go to side 2. The first song is Remember. Just has a pounding piano, and I really love this song. I'm going to give that a 10 too. There's a lot of 10s on this album, but just when you were young and the hero never got hung and always got away. And I love the Remember When You Were Small and People Seem So Tall, always had their way, which reminds me a lot, and I don't know if it was an influence or not, but I'm all lost in the supermarket, seeing the people who live on the ceiling scream and fight most scarily. That, hearing that was my first ever feeling. That's how it's been all around me, sort of, when I say a direct line to some of these albums that came out a few years later in punk rock and so forth. Love is another one of the few bright spots on the album, in a tender, fragile way. It's it's what love is and the joy of love, but even within the song, it's kind of debatable as to how easy it is to get that. A lot of people don't, unfortunately. This probably should have been the single instead of Mother. Might have done better chart wise and radio play wise. Great piano. I love the piano outro on the song. I love the song as a whole. Love No Surprise gets a 10. Third song is Well, 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 which, back when I got the album way back when, wasn't crazy about this song at first, but it's grown on me a lot over the years. Just sort of the pulse, heartbeat pulse of the bass, the screaming vocal, sort of goes back and forth with a little bit more grounded, tender vocal. The scorching guitar work from John throughout, some of his best guitar work, some of Ringo's best drumming, and this album, a lot of this is a lot of great drumming in the Beatles, of course, but this is some of Ringo's best post-Beatle drumming, I think. So yeah, this is just sort of a template for punk rock, which would not come around for another 5 or 6 years, but just sort of an early version of that, I think. And I wouldn't have given Well, Well, Well a 10 back in 1977, but today and now I do. Fourth song, Look at Me, which was something that he wrote back in the White Album days and just held on to and brought out on this. And it seems it could have fit on the White Album. It has sort of that Mother Nature's son, child of nature, which would become Jealous Guy on the next album, sort of that feel to it. And I could see it fitting on the White Album. It's not a bad song. It's a pretty good song. I like it. It's a little bit boring, so I'm going to give that one an 8. The sort of cap to the album is God, the famous I don't believe in all of this stuff, and I don't believe in Beatles, where he's stripping away everything and just gets down to he only believes in himself and Yoko. And there's something to be said about that. There's something to be said about No Man is an Island too. The I don't believe in Bible, I don't believe in Jesus, and all that is interesting because John was always someone who was searching throughout his life for meaning and truth, and I think he went through a lot of phases. Uh, don't want to speak to him on his religious beliefs because I didn't know him, so I can't. I don't know whether he didn't have any, or whether it's times he did, or whether he was trying to figure it out and alternated between belief and non-belief and stuff. And it's pretty powerful, especially in 1970 when the Beatles' biggest musical act in the history of the world had just broken up. And I don't believe in Beatles, and the dream is over. So that was probably not what Beatle fans wanted to hear. And but it's still a very powerful song. There's that word "powerful" again. I need to find another word to use, but um, God gets a 10 in my book. The album concludes with My Mummy's Dead, which is set to the tune of Three Blind Mice, and John singing, sounding like he's across on the other side of the room. Uh, it's the downer way to end the album. Of course, he's singing about his mom, who he lost at 17, which, having just turned 30, that would have been just 13 years earlier. So it's still pretty recent uh, in retrospect. At the time when he's singing this, he just sings with this monotone, almost emotionless vocal, where he sounds numb, and it's song. That's a hard song to listen to for me. I mean, some people might scoff at the nursery rhyme tune and think it's silly, but if you listen to the words, it's kind of horrific and chilling, and even if your parents are still alive, it's not thinking about your parents dying and something most people want to think about. And if they already are gone, which is unfortunately the case for me, it's a tough one to listen to. But it hits like a fist if you can get past the Three Blind Mice melody there, which I never minded. I thought that was fine, but not an easy song to listen to. But I still give the song a 10, even though it's only a 49-second little song. It's strong, hard stuff to listen to. It always has been for me anyway. Um, so no surprise, this album gets a 10. I don't know too much else to add to it that hadn't already been said. Uh, Probably his best solo album, maybe. We'll see with the next album coming up when I get to it. But it's a good one, and I really like this album and enjoy it when I do play it. But again, it's not something that I play a whole lot. There's other albums of his that I just for a fun listening experience or work better for me. But I got to give it a 10. It's a great album and a great start to his solo career, uh, which, in a roundabout way, uh, is good and bad because he sort of did his best stuff up front, and then it was, well, diminishing returns. We'll see when I get to the rest of the albums past that point. And yeah, good album, tough album, but worth the time, and I can see why it was not a gigantic hit, uh, but still a great one.